Okay, here we are. This is the heart of what makes my business tick. This is what keeps the blood flowing. This is what really excites people. What I'm going to teach you here, you use it twofold. One, this is how you write your books, but you also incorporate this into your sales conversation. Once you explain to a prospect how you're going to write that book, they're going to jump all over it. They're going to jump all over your offer. And once you write the book this way, the readers are going to give the author a ton of compliments. So here is my 7-step story arc process. Now, in order for you to get maximum value, do yourself a favor. I hope you've been taking notes. Please take notes. Studies show that when you write stuff down as you're learning, you tend to remember it better. And well, you're taking a course to become a better writer, so write down and take some great notes. You need to learn what I'm telling you right now. It's all about storytelling. You are a professional writer. You're a professional storyteller in the written form. That's what you are at your core as a ghostwriter. You can tell any story. You can write down any story better than anyone else. That's why they're going to pay you what you charge. So in order to have that validity, in order to show mastery, you need to show your prospects that you understand the basics, the concepts, the structure of story, and even how it began. So this is what I say to prospects, and this is what you got to learn. I'll tell them, look, ever since we were children, we have been ingrained on how we receive story or information, if you will. It starts way back to the stories our parents told us once upon a time. You know, it carried over into the cartoons we watched as kids, children's books we were read to or we read, and even Bible stories that we've read or heard. There's a story arc process, and it's carried over to our favorite sitcoms growing up, and today it's the most essential ingredient in the formula that has delivered the most successful books and movies ever produced. Now, you say that to somebody, they know they're talking to a master storyteller right off the bat. And so I tell them, after much study, and this actually is what I'll say to you, I've encapsulated this all for you. This is the story arc. Should you not use the story arc to frame your outline when you're working for somebody or to guide you through your writing that book, even though you can be an amazing writer and the book will be well written, the actual flow, the story could feel disjointed to most readers because it will go against how we've been conditioned to receive story. So here we go. The 7-step story arc process. Number 1, you start with a universal truth. Now, people often ask me, Eli, how do I start my book? What should my first sentence be? The answer is, you know, just about anyone that picks up your book is going to read more than the first sentence. Anybody that's serious to maybe read your book, they're going to give you the first paragraph, maybe 2 if that first one's not a long one. So don't sit there getting all anxious about your first sentence. Don't worry about making the connection in your first sentence. Worry about making the connection in your first paragraph. As I came up with this formula, I reverse engineered what I wanted people to say to me or what I want them to feel after they read the book or parts of my book. And after analyzing the beginning, I thought, well, how could I make someone feel in just the first couple of paragraphs? What is available to me? Because a first paragraph is too short to motivate somebody to take action. It's too short to excite them or to even make them sad. So what you can do, though, is subconsciously make them think this author thinks like me. See, if they feel that me, I the writer or the author, thinks like them, they feel that I can talk to them, that I can relate to them. This is really heavy on the subconscious here. I hope you're getting it. So I like to start with a universal truth, something that almost everyone can agree with. And I'm gonna give you some examples. Here's one. The very first sentence, you have no say to what family you're born into. You know, if I had to say to what family I was born into, I'd probably pick the height of the Roman Empire, be the firstborn, not the second or third born son, right? The firstborn, right? But I had no say. Thank God he put me in the family that he did. But it's universal truth. That's something you can write, that somebody just reads and just very easily, subconsciously agrees with you. So I'd write the first paragraph or two about that, just going a little on and on. Here's another example. What happened to the work ethics of this country? I mean, especially if you're talking to somebody older, right? 200 years ago, I mean, we took this country from nothing to the world's most dominant force. Have you talked to a teenager lately? Right? If you say that, if you write that, depending on the audience, they're going to agree. Here's another universal truth. Change is inevitable. Everybody's going to agree with it. Write a couple paragraphs and you know, like proving that thesis, that statement. Change is inevitable. Look, you're a writer. You can always transition whatever universal truth you wrote to the subject matter. The transition is one sentence away. And really, that's what you get paid for, because they're giving you the content. So in a way, you're getting paid for those transitions and make it relatable. So again, get people to agree with you and they'll continue reading you. Okay, step number 2 is normalcy. This is my favorite step. This is my favorite thing to write. I love writing chapter 1s because of normalcy. So you got to use this when you're creating your outline. So this is how you do this. In chapter 1, you want to establish a foundation with the reader. And explain it like this to your prospect so that the prospect becomes a client. The first 10 minutes of every blockbuster movie that they've ever seen, the writer of that movie and the director of that movie, they establish what I call normalcy. So for example, a romantic comedy. Every romantic comedy. You see the woman, she eats by herself. She goes to weddings by herself. She's a little quirky. She talks to herself, right? She's always running late for something, right? That's normal for a romantic comedy. A thriller. You see how much the guy loves his wife. Oh my God, they've been married 35 years. They still look like they're in a honeymoon, right? You see how much he loves his kid. He's got the best relationship with his daughter in the world, right? And they established that for the first 10 minutes. Harry Potter. Every movie, he's being mistreated. Every book, he's being mistreated. Under the stairs and the island, wherever he goes, the movie starts, you know Harry's getting a tongue lashing. What they're doing is they're establishing relatability with the viewer. And you need to establish relatability with your reader. That's essential on the outset of any book. For example, in particular, I'm going to give you, okay, if you were writing a business book, let's say you're writing a business book. I'm gonna put this into practical terms for you. If you're writing a business book on sales and how to sell, what you want to do is while you're creating an outline, and this is why I said before that the biggest mistake people do when they start to write the book is they start to write the book. No, you prepare to write a great book. So you start with an outline. So as you're establishing your outline, you think of all the things and you ask your client, what are let's make a list of things that people struggle in sales. It's before you start writing chapter 1. So you get all these things, boom, 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 that people struggle with in sales. So now, when you start to write your first chapter, you start writing the things that bother them, their pain points. Maybe you're sick and tired of working 60 hours a week while getting paid your 40-hour salary, but you're still not hitting quota. That's almost every salaried employee out there, or salesperson out there, right? You're right. Maybe the worst part of your job is picking up the phone again, knowing there's a 97% chance you're going to get hung up on. And you start to list all these things that they deal with. What you're doing is you make a very big comprehensive list, as big as you can. You want to cast as wide a net as possible so that when people start reading your book, they're going to hit on one of those maybes and they're going to think, that's me. That's exactly what I struggle with. And that's where normalcy comes in. You want to let the reader know that you or their author knows their normal, everyday problem. So your goal in the first chapter is for the reader to think, this writer gets me. This writer knows exactly what I'm going through. So first you let them know you think like them with universal truth. Then you let them know that you know what they're struggling with. And by the way, this works for memoirs and biographies too. If it's a woman's life story of a lifelong life of abuse, chapter 1 shouldn't get right into her story. It should be I know what it's like to be abused. I know what it's like to be scared. I know what it's like to be taken advantage of. I know what it's like to hear the footsteps and look for a place in my room to hide. I know what it's like to cry silently in the pillow, trying not to wake up my jerk of a husband. That's your chapter 1 for a biography. Not I was born on this date. You have to establish normalcy. And it's important to know your audience to do that well. The better you know your audience, the better shot you have of connecting with them. And by the way, this works great for faith-based books. If you're writing a book about faith, this is what I did, and I'm not going to give this to you. You do this yourself. You got to work for this one yourself. I put up a post on Facebook about 3 years ago. Why do Christian people, to Christian people, why do you read Christian books? And so I got a sample of top 10 reasons why people read Christian books. Salvation, healing, getting closer to God, for a loved one to be saved, strengthening their faith, right? So once you if you got that information, if you're writing a faith-based book, what you want to do is chapter 1, maybe your faith has been struggling because that's why people read books. Maybe you have a loved one who's not saved because that's why people read books. So chapter 1, normalcy. And here's where it all is going to make sense to you. If the reader understands that you know their problem, they're going to give your book the benefit of the doubt that it can solve it. And that's why normalcy works so well. Because you're writing to salespeople about their problems, subconsciously, innately, they're going to know this book is going to solve those problems. And when you say that to a prospect, they could talk to 10 more ghostwriters. They're going to go with you. Because that's a way you enhance their book without even touching their content. This is what you bring to the table. Any other ghostwriter is just going to write their content, but you have a story arc method. That's number 2. Number 3 is the chance happening. And by the way, we're still in chapter 1. 3 of my 7 story arc steps are in chapter 1. That's how important chapter 1 is. If you win the battle of chapter 1, that's going to carry over to chapter 7. I mean, if you nail chapter 1, make them feel something, that's okay. They're going to give you time to give you that feeling again. If you strike out on chapter 1, forget about them going to chapter 2, then I'm going to buy the book. So chapter 3, I'm going to teach you how to end, almost word for word, how to end your first chapter. Let's get back to the movie analogy. 10 minutes into most movies, the story takes off. It hits overdrive. What I mean is like the romantic comedy that we talked about, the love story, 10 or 15 minutes in, we meet the love interest. Right? Maybe he's going to be the woman's rival for position. Either way, the game is afoot. Hijinks are about to ensue. And we, the viewer, we're going to get what we paid for. Over-the-top silliness and romance. That's what we paid for. So first they established the pattern of how she lives. Now we're going to see how this guy's going to totally disrupt her pattern. Right? And we get comfortable in our seats. The popcorn is finished. And now we settle down to watch what we paid for. In that thriller, the guy's kids that loved him so much, or the wife that they're still in their 30-year honeymoon, they get abducted or they get killed. The guy swears vengeance in 15, 20 minutes. Liam Neeson, I will find you and I will kill you. All right, probably the worst Liam Neeson imitation ever, but you get what I'm saying. When he says that, We, the movie viewing audience that paid to see this thriller, we're happy. We know what's about to happen. Harrowing escapes, car chases, death-defying action, right? We can't wait. That's what we paid for. Harry Potter, he's getting abused, normalcy. Then big old Hagrid comes, you're a wizard, Hattie, right? And whisks him to Hogwarts. And we who love this stuff, we get what we're paying for. 10 to 15 minutes into these movies, right? We're going to get now with Harry Potter, the magic, the wonders, the good versus evil, right? So just about every movie is based on that formula. Look, you will rarely see a movie that starts with a gunfight. You know why? Because we don't care who wins or dies. So I've discovered a way to take what works on the big screen here in this story arc process. So the way you write The Chance Happening, if it's that sales book that I was mentioning, it's going to go something like this. And I'm kind of going to freestyle it for you. I've said this enough. But you write something like, and this is word for word, your last paragraph. In this book are the answers you've been searching for. That should you manifest, should you put into practice what I teach in this book, it's going to change the trajectory of your finances. Depending on what the book's about, it's going to change your life. It's going to change your marriage. Whatever the book is about to deliver. You see, just like when the movie goes into overdrive and we know what we're going to get, you want to tell your reader what you're looking for is right here. You want to lose weight? In this book are answers you've been searching for. That should you follow my steps, my formula, my ways of eating, my habits, you're going to lose the weight you want finally and keep it off. In this book are the answers you've been searching for. Should you write like this, you're going to make a great living as a ghostwriter. In this book are the answers you've been searching for. Should you X, you're going to Y. If you can do, and that, by the way, is chapter 1. Universal truth, normalcy, chance happening, and you do this all in about 12 to 1,400 words. You don't want a huge chapter 1. 12 to 1,400 words. And when your client wants to go on a stage and wants to send, and people are asking for their book, or a show producer is asking to see the book, you can tell the client, send the book, but just tell that producer just to read chapter 1. Or just send chapter 1 in a PDF. And that's going to get your client on stages. That's going to get them on TV. Because it's not your content, it's the audience that you're helping. And that's what they want. They want to know if you know the audience's problem, who's coming to their event. When you can say this to a prospect, I'm telling you, the only thing that they're thinking is, I hope I can afford him. I hope I can afford her. And you're in a position of power. All right, so number 4 is the journey. Now, here's where it separates a little bit depending on the kind of book you're writing. By the way, chapter 1 is always that way for a nonfiction book, but then it's going to get a little different. If you're writing a memoir or a biography for someone, their journey can start in chapter 2, right? So in chapter 1, we talked about, I know what it's like to be abused, blah, 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 blah. Chapter 2, now, and then we end it in this book through my life story. You're going to get strength that you've never known. You're going to tap into a reservoir of how tough you are. But whatever, however you write that. At that point, now, even though this person, your author, isn't famous, now you've bought them time. Now the reader should invest 2, 3, or 4 chapters into now reading what this woman went through. So in chapter 2, you can start with the journey. If it's a nonfiction book, if it's a sales book, if it's a Christian book, a faith-based book, if it's a motivational book, your journey, which actually the journey is the author's content. And let me be clear, the journey is the author's content. The journey can start in chapter 2, or sometimes 3 or 4, depending on how you write. If it's a motivational book that I write for someone, I can motivate it up to 4 chapters. If it's something else that I'm not really strong with, then their journey will start in chapter 2. The journey is the book. It's the content. again, the good news about being a ghostwriter is that you don't have to invent the content. The information is given to you from the client. You've gone through the interview module. You're an expert interviewer. You've got the content. After chapter 1, 2, this is easy work. Now, as the ghostwriter, you need to bring their expertise to their content. And I said this before, you got to ask the why questions, drill down. And in module 12, I'm going to teach you some amazing tricks on how to make your clients' books as interesting as possible. And by the way, what I did just there, right there, is a hook. I just used the hook on you guys. In module 12, I'm gonna explain how to write down hooks, how to write in hooks in the books you do as well. So before I finish with the journey, sometimes I write what's called the prep for the journey. For every journey, right? For every journey, you're backpacking, you got to put some water and stuff in the backpack. So the prep for the journey is for me is a little bit of motivation, a little bit of story on why this book is important, and then a little bit of motivation, another short chapter, and then get into the author's content in chapter 3. All right, so now we are on step number 5. This is a back-to-back step, and it's called the setback and the moment of truth. These 2 steps go right after another, and this is gold, guys. At times, they both of them can constitute a single paragraph chapter. Talk about pattern interrupt, which I'll talk about later. A single paragraph chapter. That means that they're reading pages per chapter. They get to this one chapter, and the whole chapter is only a paragraph. Whoa, this must be important. And it is. It's the setback and the moment of truth. So basically, every good story has a setback, a moment of reflection. Back to the movie analogy. In the romantic comedy, they get together, but they always break up near the end. Usually it's because the guy's been trying to keep a secret from the girl. He tried to tell her 2 or 3 times, but he kept on getting interrupted. And then she finds out on her own, and now she's upset. I mean, have you seen that 1,000 times? Every movie has a setback. If you're old enough to remember the first Rocky movie, not the 17 ones that came behind it, Rocky 1. If you're old enough like me to remember it, before his championship fight, his wife Adrian falls into a coma. He wouldn't train. He was by her bedside. That's a setback. So for us, and in this this is particularly used for nonfiction books, the setback and the moment of truth, it's not about the author. So look, how do I explain this? In writing circles, the hero's journey is very well known. There's a 17-point monolith on the hero's journey that was made famous in the 70s, and that's infused so many books, and it's into many movies and stuff like that, right? That's the hero's journey, and people write books on it, and people do movies by it. By the hero, the protagonist, goes through this journey. For us, the way we do it, there is always a hero in a book, but for us, the hero is the reader. This is why you're worth what you're worth. I don't want my reader to go through the hero's journey of my client or her biography. I want to put them through the paces of the hero. So I'm not going to give, so I'm giving the reader a setback and a moment of truth. I hope you guys are getting this. Watch this over and over again. Watch this as many times as it takes for you to articulate this. You articulate this in the sales call. I've said this before, I'll say it again. You articulate this well in a sales call, you've got a client. So here's an example of a setback for a business book or a health book or a motivational type book. So if I'm writing a book on sales, I would write something like, or if I'm writing a book on motivation, a mindset book, I'd write something like, literally, this is the setback right here. The self-help industry is a billion-dollar industry. Do you want to know why? Repeat customers. Chances are, this is me writing, chances are this isn't the first book of this genre you've ever bought. This is me writing, this is the reader's setback. Chances are you've probably gone to in-person or Zoom conferences on motivation or mindset or sale or whatever. Yet you're reading this book. After doing all those other books and going to all those conferences, you're reading this book. And why? Because you never fully applied the knowledge you learned before. I want you to have the guts, the audacity to write that in a chapter, because that reader is going to feel that. That's, by the way, how you write a book that changes people's lives. When you tell them right then and there, this isn't the first motivational book you've read. The reason why you're reading this one is because you didn't do what the other book said. You haven't done what Tony Robbins told you to do. You haven't done what all these people have told you to do, and you're looking for another answer. You've got the answers. This is such good, in your face, keeping it real writing. I'm telling you, your readers will tell your client, man, your book spoke to me. You know why? Because you're speaking right to them. You write directly to the reader. It's no more we and this, it's you are reading this book, dear reader, because you, dear reader, have not put into practice what you've already learned. So that's the hero's setback. The author is giving the reader a setback. So it goes setback, and then the very next sentence, or the very next paragraph, or in that same paragraph, comes the moment of truth. Again, in every movie, there's a point where the protagonist realizes what he or she must do, come hell or high water, right? So I mean, the prodigal son says, I must go back to my father's house. This is storytelling at its finest, but I'm not reinventing the wheel, guys. This is how we grew up, being interested in story. So follow your setback with something like this. And again, you're writing directly to the reader. So after you told them that they didn't do what they've already been told to do, what they've been paid thousands of dollars to learn, they still haven't done it, so that's why they're reading this book. You say, my question to you, dear reader, is what are you going to do with what you've read so far in this book? Have you highlighted parts that touched you? As you've been reading this book, have you taken down notes? If you know that you're not going to apply what you're reading here, it might be idea to save yourself some time and put the book down. Or better yet, gift it to someone who would apply it. Tough writing? Maybe to some. Effective? Absolutely. Absolutely. You're not yelling at anybody. You're not berating anybody in public. This is going into their own head by themselves as they're reading, and they are going to internalize it, and they're going to own up to what you're saying, what the author's saying. Now, the last line in this 1 or 2 paragraph chapter sets up step number 6. Here's the line, and then we're going to get to step 6. And I write it sometimes word for word like this. But if you're committed to doing what it takes to live your best life, to do whatever they want to get from the book, I can't wait for you to get to the next chapter. I put it all together in the next chapter. So there's the setback and the moment of truth. The setback, you challenge them. The moment of truth, you challenge them again. Put it down or give it to somebody else. But if you continue reading, if you can commit to yourself that you're going to apply this, I can't wait for you to get to the next chapter, because it's all going to make sense in the next chapter. And the following chapter is step number 6, the crescendo. Number 6, the crescendo, the climax. It's the best part. It's when we watching a movie, when we want to cheer, when we want to hug someone next to us, when the book makes us cry, the movie makes us cry. For us ghostwriters, here's where we put the essence, the meat. Here's where we put it all together for our author. Now, this gets tricky sometimes with your client, because your client, not that he might or she might They will want to put their best stuff in the beginning of the book. And if they were writing it themselves, they would. Try not to. You gotta appease the client, but try not to. Now, I tell them, have you ever read a book that you enjoyed, but by the time you got to chapter 6 or chapter 7, for some reason you just never picked it up again? That's what you want to do, Mr. Client. Because the reason why you don't pick up that book again is that the author put all his best stuff too soon. And then the rest of it got watered down that me, the reader, I stopped getting the enjoyment from it. I've literally worked on books where the client would send me blogs to find content because he had already given me all the content he had. And I told that author, Les, you should tell your client, look, we're not going to water down the content to get a bigger book. We're going to make the book super impactful. And if it means a smaller book, then that's what it is. The goal is impact, not page count. Back to the crescendo. Movies, they get your attention in the beginning and they ramp up to the finale. And I'm telling you, that's the way people do story. Even video games do it. There's little boss battles. Then there's that big boss battle at the end. This is how we've been ingrained to receive stories or information. So number 6 is the crescendo. Now, when you're writing number 6, you may repeat some of what's already been written, but that's okay. You just told the reader that you put it all together so it all makes sense now. So if they read something again, not the same thing, but similar, they know that you were just laying the foundation so that when they read it this time, it all makes more sense to them. The crescendo, this chapter in a nonfiction book, should always be the second to last chapter. Always. You always want to get them cheering or crying or super motivated right before you get into step 7. Step 7, the new normal. A new normal shows where the journey led the protagonist. So most fiction authors, they don't give their readers a new normal in their last chapter. And that's a crying shame. It's one of the most important aspects of a book, and they totally miss out on it. Back to the movie analogy. A lot of movies, by the way, don't do a new normal. Growing up, I'm used to seeing at the end of a movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger say a cheesy line, there's an explosion in the background and up come the credits. He's got a hot girl in his arm. In the romantic comedy, most of the time they kiss and make up and then up roll the credits. See, I'd like to see 20 years later after they kissed and made up. I'd like to see the romantic comedy that ends with now they're dropping off their daughter off to college and they're still madly in love or they're still up to no good. And by the way, big props to Peter Jackson, the director of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I'm a geek. That's my favorite genre, to write, to read, and to watch movies. His last movie, The Return of the King, he gave us 20 minutes of new normal. I'm going to really geek out with you guys now. The ring had already been destroyed, right? The hobbits, they're back in the Shire. Sam is thriving now in the Shire, but Frodo, the protagonist, he's struggling to settle back in. It was brilliant. He ends up leaving with the 20 minutes. So for us, in just about every nonfiction book, this is how to write the last chapter of the book. Give them that great last 20 minutes. It's called new normal. You started with normalcy. You're ending it with new normal. So basically, normalcy was their problems. Now in new normal, the very last chapter, you write down, you tell the readers to imagine their lives a year from now, having applied the methodology they just learned in this book that they just read. Are they healthier? Are they happier? Are they driving a better car? Do they have their dream job? Has their marriage been saved? Are they going to trips? Whatever the book is set to do, have them close their eyes and visualize it in their mind's eye. Have them see themselves obtaining it. This makes the book more impactful because it gives that last bit of motivation to push them to actually apply what's in the book. Now, understand this very well. Watch this part of the video over and over and over again. Write this down word for word. This new normal it's gasoline. If you can say this in your sales meeting, you're going to have an incredibly high closing ratio. I know I keep on saying it, but I feel it. It's just true. Being that you know what the author wants from the book, that is where they're going to ask the reader. Are you here? Are you there? Envision it. Write it down. Write down what you see. And this is where this gets really good. If you can get your reader to write down or to envision their best life, that reader will, and this is why you do it, by the way, another reason why, that reader will never be more inclined to do what the author asks, ever. And the author is going to ask something in the last chapter. Let's say your client wants to hire you to do this book so that they can speak on stages. So in that last chapter, after you have that reader envision their best life, tell the reader to invite your author, and it'd be him, invite me to your company to speak. Invite me to your church, to your women's group, to your marriage group, to your school assembly, to the prison where your sibling is. Or to keep communicating with me, go to my private Facebook group where I get on twice a month and I answer questions and drop knowledge. That's how a book can help your author build a tribe. So I hope you're getting this. You let them envision themselves, the best versions of themselves because of this book, and now you ask. So books aren't magic. There's people that have written and published books and they thought it was going to make them so credible they're going to double their business. But they never asked for business. They thought that this book was going to put them on stages. They didn't ask to be invited on stages. It's not magic. Some authors have told me, yeah, but I put that in the about the author section. Who reads the about the author section? The author. That's it. Most people don't read that section. So you're going to tell your client, your prospect, at the end of your book, Mr. Smith, we're going to give a call to action in the last chapter, not at the end. Not in about the author section. There are millions of people that have written business books, faith-based books, motivational books, and they expected it to magically open up all sorts of doors for them. Crickets. For one, they didn't use the 7-step story arc method that you now know. But the main reason is they never asked for what they want. Ask for what you want. Books don't magically convert to stages. Books don't magically convert to more sales in your business. Books give credibility and information, but without your client's call to action, there's no call to action. So in new normal, that's what you're doing. The new normal is you have them envision their new normal, their best versions of themselves. Then you hit them up with that, come join my Facebook group so I can build my tribe. And in that Facebook group, you lead on to a course that the author's selling, but that's another course entirely. But I like to end books with a bit of motivation, but that's just me. After the author asks for their call to action, I like to end with 1 or 2 paragraphs of motivation. And the new normal is essential in any book written in these times, regardless of the genre. Regardless of the genre. If it's your memoir, don't end it, we all lived happily ever after. You're still alive. You know, there's no happily ever after. Invite me to your women's group. I would love to speak life to your group. I don't like personally long final chapters. If your reader is enjoying the book, which they should because, they just came from the crescendo chapter. They're enjoying themselves. Now they just envision their best lives. I like it when they're in the crescendo and they flip over to see how long the last chapter is, and it's only a few pages. I want them, because remember, I designed this whole system based on how I want them to feel throughout. And the way I want my reader to feel when they get to the last chapter, I want them to feel regret that it's almost over. So don't write a huge last chapter. I broke down book writing from the perspective of the reader. Okay? One of the questions to myself, again, how do I want the reader to feel going into the last chapter? Regret. Their time with me, with my book, is nearly at an end. And if they feel that, they're more inclined to go to follow through with the call to action from your author. So with that in mind, the final chapter should be somewhere between 1,000 words and 1,600 words. The real goal to shoot for here is 1,200 words. Just not long enough. Just enough to keep them wanting more. And 1,200 words regardless of the genre. Let the reader know right off the bat, like you did in chapter 1, that they can trust you with your time with a short chapter. Same thing at the end. It's not a long, drawn out, hashed out goodbye. If you're writing a novel, you can probably bump it up to about 2,000 words, but trust me when I tell you, 1,200 words is the sweet spot. So if you can articulate this 7-step story arc to a prospect, on top of how we get paid, on top of the weekly meetings, how it's very little time on their end, you're going to be a selling machine. Listen, don't shortcut the story arc. When you start writing the book for your client, and if he or she wants to do it another way, remind that client that they hired you because they wanted you to filter their information through the story arc so that it will be best, most widely received. Don't concede to the client. Guys, listen, the client isn't always right. The client isn't always right. To please your client, you're not going to get the impact. And then without the impact, you're not going to get the referrals. So fight against at the end of the day, you got to give the client what they want. But if they say, I don't think we should do it this way, remind them of the story arc process. So do yourself a favor, watch this video here, this module over and over and over again. This is, if there was one module, if these were all books and there was a fire and the whole course was on fire and you could save one book, save this book. This is, you put the story arc into you're selling. If you write down your books, filter through the story arc, you're writing amazing content. The 7-step story arc. It's easy to get into business. It's easy to open up a business. You just go to whatever legal entity is in your state and you incorporate. It's easy to start a business. But for a ghostwriting business, the 7-step story arc is how you stay in business.